Hi, I'm Joe Dalton and welcome to Breakthrough Brands, the show that tells how Ireland's entrepreneurial DNA is rebooting the country one successful startup at a time. In this series, we'll demystify the process of starting up your own enterprise and growing it into a successful business by sharing the inspirational, educational, real-life experience of ordinary Irish business people. We talk to entrepreneurs who have taken control of their own destiny by doing what they love. Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to Breakthrough Brands. Today, I have a very interesting person on the line, all the way from the USA. I have Christian Meyers. Christian, are you there?
Yes, I am, Joseph. Thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure and a privilege. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And Christian, I was looking through your LinkedIn profile and I was very, very impressed. If I was an employer looking for someone to hire, I'd actually be knocking on your door.
Oh, wow. I really appreciate that.
Tell me, you're with Street Global Venture Capital.
Yes.
You've been involved with multiple companies. You've been a co-founder for multiple companies. And someone was saying as well that you were involved in Salesforce, which everyone over here would know very, very well.
Yes, I was. It was a phenomenal learning experience. I joined when it was in one room with fewer than 100 people. Sometimes I would help Mark Benioff, the founder, sneak his dog Koa into the building and into the startup space. I met a lot of the people that helped reinvent different parts of software sales in order to make software sales effective for cloud computing. And what I learned a lot about was when you're reinventing something, when you're fundamentally changing a product, you have to rethink all aspects of the business. But that's challenging because there's a big pull to simply repeat what we already know or what people have learned before. So that's just some of what I learned, but it was incredible. I helped the company grow from a startup to a public company. And that in itself is something to learn from all the transitions that occur as you go from a startup to a fully scaled company focusing on business operations.
It must be
so it was wonderful.
50 billion plus now, is it? It's worth the company.
It's worth quite a bit, well over 50 billion. In fact, from my studio, I am looking at the Salesforce Tower, which now has redefined San Francisco's skyline in a beautiful way. Wow. And I see it adding floors and windows every day. It's pretty neat to think that all those jobs came from a small team that was taking a risk in a period that quickly turned into a recession.
That's true. So. That's true. Oh, they have a big office just not a million miles from here, probably maybe 2 miles down the road from our studio. So
yes, I had a friend who was managing that office for a while when it was starting out. It must have been a great experience.
Yeah, it's a good area. So. Christian, tell me, where did it all start? Tell me, where did the business start when you were a young man?
I found myself always drawn to researching patterns in business. Whatever it was that was an interest, whether it was bicycling or design, I was always interested in the business aspects of it. And for me, there's a great beauty in applied arts. So while I may appreciate the fine arts or fiction, my tastes tend to gravitate towards industrial design and nonfiction. I'm very interested in building things, and that was something that was part of me since as long as I can remember. And I think those are the things, when I give people career advice, I always ask them to pay attention to the deepest patterns and to notice those in an unfiltered way, because oftentimes those deep patterns point the way to successful, sustainable careers.
So, and tell me, what gets you up in the morning then? What drives you now?
I get to do what I enjoy to, as far as I know, the full extent possible. I love learning about different business domains, and today as an investor, I have to learn about areas that I may know relatively little about. Genetic engineering, for example, or engineering a chip to allow fluids to pass through it at very small scales, or what software needs hospitals have in Nigeria, or what types of financial infrastructure might be missing in different areas of the world. So all of these domains are things I've had to learn about in order to identify with the entrepreneurs and evaluate their businesses as an investor, and then to help them. And the opportunity to do that as your work is the best for me. And at one point in my life, I also was thinking of becoming a teacher, and I realized it's a very important job, but I wanted to build things, create things, help create jobs, help create companies, help reshape how people live their lives on a day-to-day basis, and wanted to build companies. So I shifted from the notion of possibly becoming a teacher to someone who wanted to first learn about how to create these Silicon Valley style technology companies, to someone who was actually building it, and now my dream to invest in them. And what I get to do as an investor is I can help all of the companies in our portfolio. We help them with their strategy. We help them with business development. We help them when they're trying to hire a head of business or sales. And I love the helping, coaching aspect of what I do. And I get to do it on a wide scale with a great group of founders who I learn from. Another aspect of my job, which I treasure, is I just love people. I could spend all day meeting people, and that's a huge part of the job, is to be out in the field. A very important aspect of venture capital and investing is to simply place yourself in the arenas where you're likely to encounter interesting people who you could invest in and establish a bond with them. And some of my best investments happened not through complete chance, but through harnessing probability and meeting the right people. So I've located myself in San Francisco in the Mission District, which is central to everything going on in San Francisco in the startup scene and technology. And because I'm here, the places I inhabit create opportunities because I run into other people who are working as investors or starting companies. And one of my favorite companies is helping life sciences companies, so pharmaceutical companies, produce anti-cancer gene therapies at the volumes necessary to deliver those therapies to patients. And the way I met the founder was I was standing outside my friend's house, waiting for him to hop out. We were going to go for a meeting, and the gentleman who started this company, Indie Labs, was walking by, and he had a T-shirt for Y Combinator, which is the best incubator in Silicon Valley in the world. And I knew some of his colleagues who had gone through the same training group as he did. And I spoke to Ryan and I said, hey, did you go through that? And he told me about his company. And then he said, well, why don't you come by our lab? And my business partner, Alicia Silberg, and I went by his lab. And from the very first meeting with Ryan, we felt he was the best example of a highly professionalized startup founder that we'd ever met. And there were a bunch of other intersections. I had invested in another company where Ryan knew the CEO, and that helped validate me in his eyes. But simply, I think the big lesson here is being in touch with those deep patterns, allowing yourself to integrate those into your work, and then harnessing probability to your advantage, which might mean being around the right people in the right places. Those are the long-term keys to a successful career.
I honestly believe that, sometimes you do business with people, not with cold calling or, lead generation. You might bump into them in the gym or over here in a bar.
Exactly.
and have a conversation. Exactly. Or someone says, look, I know this guy, and you hit it off. And you know yourself, you're a big fan of sales, that an impression is in the first 20 seconds, and really when you get to meet that person, you go, okay, they've got something to say. Two things. One, I love San Fran. I was telling Alicia that it was one of my favorite places. I spent a bit of time in San Diego when I was over in the States, and San Fran was my favorite. And you said you were going to be a teacher. I was once thought I was going to be a priest, believe it or not.
I love it.
Yeah, and
I love it.
Yeah,
it's another thing we have in common. I was heavily focused on religious studies when I was in college.
Yeah, and then I met girls and decided to forget about it.
Well, yes, as we grow, we see the full range of life, and then maybe some of those things where we felt very certain at a young age start to expand, and we have other benchmarks and reference points.
I know I'm happily married with four children. So
wonderful. That sounds fun.
Yeah,
that sounds fun.
Tell me, as you probably know, we have Enterprise Ireland over here, and there's a lot of startup hubs, and Ireland would be a big focus for the multinationals from the States to come over and set up shop. I was reading an article in one of the papers there, and there's something like 32,000 new businesses after starting up in the last couple of months, where we are one of the powerhouses in Europe where we are out of the recession. You can see that people are spending again, so there's a real good feeling in the country. And when you get that good feeling, you have a lot of people sparking up creative ideas. What would you say to someone who's in their 20s or maybe early 30s that have an idea and they want to approach someone like yourself or a government body that will give them funding, and they have a well-oiled elevator pitch? What advice would you give them?
The first advice I would give is to learn everything you can about what the person is you're pitching is going to want, and everything about their psychology. And pitching someone on a business is selling. In this case, you're selling equity in your business if you get their investment interest. And the best way to sell is to understand your buyer.
Yeah.
And investors usually invest in very specific types of companies. There are investors who are looking for a predictable conservative return, and that investor will invest in certain types of companies. There are investors who invest in venture technology companies at early stages, and those investors are looking for a different type of profile. And then besides sorting themselves based on the type of return and they're looking for and the risk they're willing to take, investors tend to specialize in specific sectors. Alicia and I are thematically broad when we invest because we believe that's where our edge comes from. We are willing to learn about the hardest topics in the world and go to the places and get to know the entrepreneurs in new industries and be there before other people. But an equally valid approach to investing would be to say, I know the networking space, or I know the security space, or I know the hospitality space in and out. I understand every angle that matters for assessing a business, and I'm just going to focus on that. And that's another thing that I didn't understand when I was creating startups, but investors are highly specific about what they invest in. And if you can first know that and then apply it by learning about whomever you're talking to in advance, that's very important. And then I think another piece that often gets overlooked in not so much in sales with professional salespeople who might be selling enterprise software, but with startup founders who are pitching their business, there's a psychology to this. The investor you're talking to is actually a person. They have families, they have career goals and concerns just like anyone else. And let's say they're a new partner at a venture capital firm, and they have yet to make an investment. That first investment they make is going to really set the tone for their career. And at some of the firms, they may only have an opportunity to make 1, 2, or 3 investments a year. So the perceived risk that goes with choosing any one company for that person could be extremely high. And a lot of people don't understand that type of thing. They forget to inquire about what might be driving this person, what fears and hopes might they have, because they're not an investor, they're a person, and they have their own career goals. So those are important things.
It's I get people coming up to dropping me emails and saying, look, Joe, I have a great product here, and do you know anyone that would be interested in funding it, or where I can get money? And there's one thing that says, have you any sales? No. Have you done your market research? Well, I had an idea in my head and I've built it. And I'd say, look, what's the traction that you have? Is it it's a brilliant product and I think it's great and it's going to fly. I said, look, no one's going to invest in that until you show proof.
Exactly. And those are great questions, and that's in the form of your questions. Excellent advice. And one of the things I always tell prospective founders is, you're the first investor. Your time capital may be all you have, or it may be the most precious thing you have, but you could do anything with that time. You could go work for an investment bank. You could become a management consultant, or a salesperson for a top company like Salesforce. And I think people lose sight of the fact that they're investing their own time, and there's an opportunity cost to that when they start companies. And those types of rigorous but also very fundamental questions that you're asking are the ones they should be asking themselves to start, because ultimately a business is for the people starting it. It's not just something to do. And if you're taking yourself seriously and valuing yourself, you're going to ask those questions about the business fundamentals, and you're going to research them and test them in a very harsh way almost, because you want to know you're investing your time in the right way.
Yeah, it's like, oh, you've done research, okay, and who was it? Well, it was my mother, my father, my brother, and my sister, and they thought it was a great idea. I said, yeah, you have to venture a bit further than that on it. But
exactly. Take yourself to where you think you're going to get the most critical feedback.
But you have to have the passion and the belief in your product as well to drive it. I think that is something that's important. I know some people will create an idea and then they're hoping that someone else will go out there and sell it for them. But I believe that if it's the person that has written the software or has developed the product, they should learn the art of selling, because they will have more passion and belief than bringing anyone in initially when starting off on it. That's one of my opinions that I would give them as well.
Absolutely, it's great advice. It's great advice.
What hasn't worked for you in the past?
Well, along those lines, being overly opportunistic, doing something just because it would be an accepted business venture for me. So, doing things just because I knew I could make money. I knew I had the background to take a certain role or start a certain type of company. That can feel easy. It can feel smart. But in the long run, if you're not passionate and deeply connected with your product and your venture, you have a built-in flaw. And when I ignored that, that's when things didn't work out as I wanted to.
So if you were looking at something that you saw dollar signs instead of following your gut and your passion, it was a mistake.
Exactly. Ideally, you want to marry the two. And what I tell people is, what is cool, what seems hot, what seems financially lucrative today, that comes and goes. Trends always change. Yeah. And if you harness who you are, let's say you're a great designer, you need to trust that and stick with it. You might apply it in different ways as the world changes, but if you put yourself into the flow of that, and so you're naturally drawn to learning everything you can about the topic, you're always practicing it, you're always on yourself. It's easy to network because you care about what you're talking about. And as you said, people form a positive impression because you're excited about what you're doing and you're conveying that energy. All of that together over a lifetime adds up to a very powerful, fulfilling career. But if you're simply chasing trends and trying to act opportunistically, that's usually not sustainable.
True. Tell me, what's new for, God, I was going to say 2017, but it's nearly over.
Yes.
What do you see is new for 2018?
I think what we're seeing is the technology industry was often about companies that were creating the software, the infrastructure that was powering traditional businesses. So a software company might sell to a very large consumer goods company some type of software that would help with logistics or finance. And that's been the focus of technology. But now what we're seeing is technology and the style of company that technologists create and the business models that technologists use are, all of that's being used to reinvent industries. So startups are not simply enabling financial services companies, they're becoming financial services companies. We work with a company that is creating a payment network for all of Africa, because in Africa, the vast majority of transactions are done with cash, and credit cards have very little penetration. And a lot of that is because there isn't a unified payment network. So the company doing this is essentially creating something akin to what Visa and MasterCard have created. And startups are doing things like that. They're becoming financial services companies, or like Uber, they're becoming transportation companies. And we're working with a lot of companies that are doing this in healthcare. And you had asked what's big now. I think we're going to see a lot more companies that are startups that are reinventing industries and taking on giants in those industries. But we're also going to see a lot happening in healthcare and health tech, things that where small teams of scientists and business people are developing things that will have massive positive implications for the world. So some exciting companies we're seeing are creating bioengineered antivenom, because there's a huge need around the world for antivenom to counter snake bites. The way it's made today is based on a method developed in the 1800s.
That's right.
Venom. And there's not enough of it. Yeah. And some countries and continents lack it entirely. There's a tremendous human cost to this, but there's a great business opportunity. And the way they are genetically engineering the antitoxin, it seems like science fiction. And we're seeing companies that are creating chips that can test someone's blood in 20 minutes. And that could revolutionize healthcare in a traditional setting. When you go see your doctor, you could get immediate results. But what it means is blood testing can be taken to places in the world where there isn't the logistics system or refrigeration necessary to do traditional blood testing. So we're seeing incredible things happen in healthcare.
Well, if you look at even going back to the genetic makeup, when they first started looking at genetics, there was teams of hundreds of geneticists looking at all the DNA. A very good friend of mine, a colleague of mine, Keith, worked on the project as well, the Geno project. He's based in Washington, D.C. And now you have, there'll be machines now that you go in, you'll get a thumbprint and it'll give you your full genetic makeup, and you could, I think there's companies in China somewhere, could be wrong, could be $100, $300, where it used to be $1,000. So it's that whole space is I love it. I just, it's so fascinating, and where we're going to be in another 10, 20 years, I look forward to where it's all going in health-wise. I had last week I had Glenville Nutrition in, who are based in Ireland, and they use genetic tests and they use other tests as well, especially stool tests, to find out how people are living and what's wrong with them and how they can cure them.
Yes, exactly. A lot of exciting preventative medicine, and then new techniques for dealing with systemic diseases and really taking care of risks that could be debilitating to people, families, and populations, and then a lot of new exciting potential cures. And what you just said is what's happening. The unit economics of healthcare and health technology are changing so that small teams can create very powerful companies and take on industries. And it's analogous to what happened with cloud computing, kind of circling back to Salesforce. When Salesforce started, it was very expensive to create an enterprise software company because you had to create versions of the software for every conceivable architecture that your customers had, because you were installing software on premise. And then cloud computing, just the notion of a centralized and distributed software program that everyone could access, just like you can log onto a website, that changed the economics and allowed smaller and smaller teams of software developers to enter different categories. And the same thing is happening in health tech.
But it's a brand name as well, isn't it? It's on everyone's lips. Tell me, when did you realize you were an entrepreneur? Go back, give me some juicy information when you were a teenager. When you realized, hey, I've got the guts, I've got the brawn, and I know that I'm going to be successful.
Well, so that's an interesting question. The advantage that young people have today is it's in the vocabulary, and it's an accepted, in fact, encouraged career. And when I was growing up, people, entrepreneurs were seen as renegades and rogues, and that's what you did if you were especially out there and crazy and risk-taking. But the patterns that I had showed that I was interested in business. From as early as I can remember, I always had landscaping businesses or newspaper delivery businesses. And my grandfather, he wrote some of the very first textbooks on computer science and helped embed computer technology. And we're talking about, the 1960s in a company that became a very large company worth over $1 billion. And I spent a lot of time with him, visiting manufacturing plants and data centers and things like that. And it always captured my imagination. And so I've been always striving to make money any way I can and enjoying it as well. But also I was exposed to a lot of business activity at a young age. And then I think coming to California was when I actually gave myself the opportunity to think of myself as an entrepreneur. And that's the reason I stayed here in San Francisco. The question people ask you isn't, what's your family background, what's your education, et cetera. It's, what are you passionate about? Yeah. What do you want to build? And are you doing it? And it's that sense of possibility that is in the culture here that allowed me to think of myself as an entrepreneur. So
I think with the word entrepreneur over on this side of the water, if you're an entrepreneur, a lot of people were frightened of saying the word because, they might be being put themselves on a pedestal, which everyone then can rip them down, or the business. won't succeed, and we all over here. It's really that, oh well, in America, an entrepreneur has to fail 3 or 4 times before he's given the badge of honor, and in Europe, if you're an entrepreneur and you fail once, that's it.
Yes.
Tough. Yeah. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
That's a great point. It's something I've learned and I really admire and respect about European entrepreneurs. And as you said, if you fail once, it can destroy your ability to get credit.
Yeah,
it can impact your social relationships and your future prospects. You might have to reinvent yourself.
You do.
We've met people who've had to do that, and I have it easy in San Francisco compared to people in other parts of the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you have to kind of go, and that's what I say to people. What's the difference between an entrepreneur? Someone that goes, right, I don't really care what everyone else thinks. I know I have a good idea. And when everyone else is in a business and they feel, oh, this is falling apart, I've given it a period of time and I'm jumping ship, they're the ones that see the end result and keep on ploughing through.
It's true.
If it was easy to be in business, to run your own business, we wouldn't have employees. Everybody would be self-employed, and everybody would be out there doing what entrepreneurs do. So it is hard to create a business. It is hard to be an entrepreneur, and people should realize that. And entrepreneurs and business owners should actually give themselves a slap at the back, because there's not a lot of people that have the guts to do it.
Absolutely. You touched on a lot of important points. One of them is, as an entrepreneur, you really have to learn to set aside your ego and focus on data and information and results. And when people doubt what you're doing or criticize you in a way that might even be meant to undermine you, you can't be distracted by that. And you do have to stick with these things in order for them to become what you want them to be. I know people that have founded companies that are worth well over $1 billion now, and I've seen them struggle. I have a friend. He worked with me at SuccessFactors, which was another company defined by sales excellence, and he went and became the CEO of a startup. And to us, that looked really cool. And at the time, that startup was probably 8 people. After a month or so, he figured out he had to fire everyone almost, restart the company. So he had left this position as one of the most trusted, senior most executives at a public company that was taking off to go to this startup, and he had to rebuild it. He was able to rebuild it over several years, and ultimately it became a public company. But I think when people see these news stories about companies that have gone public, they don't realize how gut-wrenching and how long it took to get these companies to where they are, and the incredible sacrifices founders and CEOs have to make for companies to reach that scale.
I think
it's not to be done casually.
No, and I also think people forget about the family of entrepreneurs, the wife, the children. They're the ones in the background. They're the ones that, are, okay, what are we doing for money this month? What are we doing? How are we going to pay the rent? Because the entrepreneur believes in the product. And they're the ones that give the support. And people forget about the people in the background, the silent but trusting partners. Exactly.
And there are a lot of wonderful partners and families supporting entrepreneurs.
They are.
And when people aspire to do things on that scale or take on any entrepreneurial venture, I always say, make sure you get firsthand data. Go spend time with someone who's done that. Ideally, a lot of time. Ideally, you would work for them for a year or more. But at least spend time with them and understand what it's like and what they're going through, because it's very glamorized in our media. And just like anything, when you see a pop star or a celebrity in cinema or a famous artist, they didn't just get there. They had to work torturously hard for many, many years to get there, and they're still working that hard. And anything of great merit, and that's very fulfilling, takes that type of commitment. Nothing is easy.
I'm going to ask you a sales question.
Please.
A new company, someone starting off, how do they go about making sales?
I think you want to approach it as an anthropologist. And instead of coming up with what you think is the coolest product and idea and your best theory about the price point, and then attempting to sell it from that standpoint, you want to first develop a theory. I have a theory that this size company with this type of buyer in this industry needs this product. And you sketch it up and you go and you talk to as many of those people as you can. I'm developing this, and I think it solves this problem, and I think I will charge this much for it. And you'll get a lot of feedback. And a lot of times you'll discover the thing that you thought was most important for them isn't. But this thing that you built that seems so simple and non-essential is what they care about. And it's that customer engagement. There's a great book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Steve Blank called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. And it discusses how a startup is a sales investigation. It's about beginning with the theory and testing it by talking to actual live customers, getting out of the office and talking to customers and getting that type of feedback so you can test your theory, which might be directionally sound, but as far as actual product features, the customers will tell you what matters to them.
I would totally agree. I have advised startups to pick up the phone and say to companies, hi, look, I'm a new startup. I have a product. I'm not sure how it's going in the marketplace, but we're targeting people within your industry. Would you be able to give me 10, 15 minutes? And people knowing, one, it's a startup. Okay, these guys are trying their best. Secondly, people love to help if you ask them in the right way. And they'll go, look, I'll give you 15, 20 minutes. They'll go into the company. They'll talk about their product. And then at the end of that, they'd say, look, what's your opinion of it? And they might go, it's good. Say, look, would you and they might even get a sale out of it. But they're not going in heavy-handed. This is what we're doing. Says, look, can you help me? We have an idea, and I'm looking for your advice. And startups, if they approach companies this way, you'll be surprised the amount of meetings they'll actually achieve.
Exactly. I think that's excellent advice, because it's not about, the goal isn't to be right with your theories. The goal is to win.
Yeah. Definitely. That's, it's all about winning. It's all about retorting. Tell me, tell me, what's the best business advice you have ever received, Christian?
The best business advice. So as I said, I like research, and I was interviewing at an investment bank to be a research analyst. And the gentleman who was interviewing me said, you could have this job, you could do this job, but you could do anything, and make sure that you pay a lot of attention to who you are and what you're intrinsically interested in, and make sure you spend time understanding what it's really like to do this work before you take this type of job. And that is incredible advice.
Definitely.
And it's really about knowing who you are and being honest about that. And then it's about, a career choice it's very similar to what we're talking about with sales here. When you're starting out, you need to spend time understanding what the job is really like. And people spend more time researching TVs than they do figuring
Yeah.
out what it's like to do a certain job.
I just hand them over to my kids now to tune in. Best book. What's the best book, a business book you would suggest for my listeners to read?
Well, I have a bunch.
You can only give me one.
Well, I'm going to say read Steve Blank's 4 Steps to the Epiphany about the difference between a startup and a scaled up company. And since we're talking about startups today, and it also talks about the process of customer discovery and getting to a scalable sales model. It's an excellent book.
I've taken note of that. I'm reading The $1 Million Consultant at the moment from Alan Wise. Great book. Tell me.
There's so many good books.
Oh, there's brilliant.
I love it.
I like Alicia. I read as many as I can each month. Where can people find you if people want to reach out to you and ask you for advice, or they might have a good product or some sort of tech industry? Where can people get hold of you?
Certainly. Well, I'm on LinkedIn. It's Christian Meyers, and if you search for Christian Meyers Investor, San Francisco, I'm giving away the secrets that I use to filter people, because you should be able to figure that out, right? But if you do that on LinkedIn, you'll see me.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to play out with your favorite song. So give me a song and tell me why you picked this song, and then we'll play out with it.
Oh, wow. So I was thinking of the John Coltrane song Equinox.
Okay. And why?
It's a beautiful song that I think is seasonally appropriate, and it has a lot of resonance with my family. And
good memories.
He was someone who reinvented sound, and I love musicians like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Jimi Hendrix that took something and completely changed the way people thought about it. So
I was at a festival last weekend, a 3-day festival, and there was a lot of old bands there. Still getting over it, but music is great for the soul. Christian?
It's very important. When I was young, U2, that's all I cared about.
I love U2. I absolutely think they're brilliant. Bono doesn't live a million miles from me, so if you do get over here, we can go knock on his door and tell him.
I like it, and they're a great example of a band that's endured because they built a great team and they loved what they did and they stayed connected to it, and it came from a true place of passion.
They were a Christian band beforehand. Did you know that?
I did.
Yeah,
I think I read everything I could about them when I was young.
They're brilliant. Bono drinks down in the local boozer that I would drink in, and occasionally you would go in and he'd be sitting in the corner having a pint when he's not on tour. Or in the States. Christian, thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been a complete pleasure. I hope you've had fun. You've given the listeners a wealth of information, and I would like to say thank you, and I will chat to you soon. Take care and God bless.
Thank you for the privilege. Have a wonderful weekend.
You too. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.